السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، عشاق الجودة في كل مكان، حياكم الله. بعد استراحة الإجازة الصيفية نعود في برامج المجلس السعودي للجودة للعام 2024، ونبدأ بمحاضرة حقيقة من المحاضرات التي تمس موضوع من المواضيع المهمة في عالم الجودة، وهو موضوع البنية التحتية للجودة والمؤشر العالمي لهذه البنية، أو أحد المؤشرات العالمية لهذه البنية. ونستعرض فيها تحت موضوع المقارنة المعيارية للبنية التحتية للجودة لدعم أهداف التنمية المستدامة QI4SD. وهذا يبدو لي من الأمور المهمة جدا لخبراء الجودة أن يحرصوا على الاطلاع ومتابعة مثل هذا الأمر، لأن حقيقة لا معنى للجودة إذا لم يكن لها أثر على حياة الناس وثرائهم وإنعاش اقتصادهم واستدامة الحياة في سياق منتظم، ويضيف لهم جودة إلى الجودة الموجودة. ضيفنا اليوم حقيقة ومتحدثنا أحد الخبراء الدوليين في هذا المجال، ومن توفيق الله عز وجل أنا التقيت فيه في أحد المؤتمرات، فوجدت فيه فرصة أن نعرض خبراته من خلال المجلس السعودي للجودة. الأستاذ فرانسوا دينر من جنوب أفريقيا، وهو الآن في جنوب أفريقيا ويشاركنا هذه الخبرة عبر الأثير. فرانسوا طبعا هو يملك مجموعة استشارية اسمها انسيلدوس، وله خبرة أكثر من 30 سنة في مجال الاندستريال كومبيتيتيف، اللي هي التنافسية الصناعية والتطوير الصناعي. حقيقة شغل منصبين مهمة جدا أتمنى أنكم لاحظتوها، وهي تمس هذا الموضوع. كل المنصبين تؤثر في البنية التحتية للجودة، أو لها علاقة وثيقة في البنية التحتية للجودة. ركنين مهمان: ركن المترولوجيا، وهو ركن قياس الكميات. فكان فرانسوا كان رئيس المركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة، أو للقياس في جنوب أفريقيا، الناشونال مترولوجي لاب. وفي نفس الوقت أيضا هو كان عضو لساناس، ولا زال هو عضو لمجلس إدارة الاعتماد أو جهاز الاعتماد في جنوب أفريقيا. أيضا هو من الاستشاريين المتعاونين مع المنظمة الدولية للتنمية الصناعية يونيدو، تحت مظلة اليونايتد نيشنز، الأمم المتحدة. يحمل شهادة الماجستير في الدراسات التنموية، وطبعا في الاقتصاد، والبكالوريوس يحملها في تخصص الهندسة الإلكترونية. طبعا موضوعنا اليوم سيتعرض لعدة مواضيع أو جوانب مهمة جدا في موضوع البنية التحتية للجودة والمؤشر العالمي والمقارنات المعيارية. يمكن بعضكم اطلع على المين توبكس، ولا ودي أخذ وقت كثير لأنه عندنا أيضا نستعرض شرائح نذكر فيها في برامج المجلس. وأيضا سيستعرض بلا شك المقدم الأستاذ فرانسوا الكثير من الجوانب هذه حسب ما هو منشور في النشرة الخاصة بهذه المحاضرة. أذكر أنه المحاضرة مترجمة لحظية في نفس الوقت، وعشان توصلون للترجمة هناك علامة في التطبيق تستطيعون أن تختاروا اللغة، تحاولون تغيرون بين اللغة من عربي إنجليزي أو إنجليزي عربي حتى تسمعون الترجمة العربية. معنا الأستاذ نبال نعيم مترجمنا الدائم يقدم الترجمة هذه متزامنة مع المحاضرة. نذكر أيضا لمن أراد أو رغب في الحصول على شهادة أن يصل إليها من خلال هذا الرابط ويقدم طلبه من خلال هذا الرابط، وهي شهادة إلكترونية. نذكر أن أيضا سنستأنف فعالياتنا في ورش العمل الإلكترونية في المجلس، وورشة 6 سيجما مع البروفيسور هاني العمري دائما، يعني ضمن الورش المهمة جدا. وستقدم بإذن الله عز وجل يوم 11 ربيع الأول موافق 14 سبتمبر، بعد 11 يوم تقريبا. لمن أراد الحضور رغب أن يسجل من خلال الQR الموجود على الإعلان. أيضا نذكر أن المجلس يعقد ملتقى الجودة السنوي 12 لمجموعة الجودة في القطاع العمل الخيري، والذي سيعقد في 14 من ربيع الأول الموافق 17 سبتمبر، كما هو مشاهد في الإعلان، والتسجيل متاح عن طريق الQR. أيضا من الفعاليات التي نذكر فيها الملتقى العشرون لمجموعة الجودة في القطاع الصحي، وهذا يوافق 22 ربيع الأول. ما شاء الله، يعني تشوفون انطلاقة مع بعد العودة من الاستراحة، نعوض فيها ما فات من الأيام التي يعني ما استطعنا أن نقدم فيها شيء في خلال الإجازة. فأيضا الملتقى مهم جدا للعاملين في قطاعات الجودة في القطاع الصحي. التسجيل سيعلن قريبا بإذن الله عز وجل. الحضور مجاني وبدون تسجيل مسبق عفوا. والموقع في مدينة مكة المكرمة العاصمة المقدسة في مستشفى قوى الأمن. نذكر أيضا الملتقى الأول للجودة والتميز المؤسسي بقطاع الأوقاف، أحد الملتقيات المهمة جدا، وهذا أول ملتقى يعقد المجلس تحت مظلة وقف الجودة والإتقان، وسيكون إن شاء الله عز وجل في يوم الخميس 21 ربيع الثاني من الساعة 9 صباحا حتى الساعة 3 مساء، وهو حضوريا في مدينة جدة، وستعلن التفاصيل قريبا بإذن الله عز وجل. المجلس ولله الحمد أمضى 30 عام في خدمة الجودة وتقديم المحاضرات والمواد العلمية والجوائز التي تخص الجودة، وحق للمجلس أن يحتفل بهذه المسيرة الرائعة التي يعني أنتم أحد أسباب نجاحها، أنتم وشركائنا داعمين لهذا المجلس، هذا الكيان، وعلى رأسهم الهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة. مسيرة المجلس التاريخية منشورة في الموقع ومنشورة عبر تويتر، يمكنكم الاطلاع عليها حتى تتذكرون هذه المسيرة خلال 30 عام، كيف أن العمل الدائم يصاحبه تطوير مستمر. المجلة أو النشرة الإلكترونية للمجلس السعودي للجودة بين أيديكم من خلال الموقع، تستطيعون الوصول لها من خلال رابط الQR. كتب المجلس متاحة للشراء لمن أراد الوصول لها عن طريق الQR أيضا، أو المتجر الإلكتروني. ومنها مجموعة كتب البروفيسور زايري رحمه الله. نذكر هنا أيضا البرنامج السنوي يحدث بشكل يعني مستمر، ويصلكم عن طريق الواتساب وعن طريق الإيميل، وأيضا عن طريق لمن أراد متابعة المجلس في تويتر. يمكن أخيرا نذكر أن هنا المجلس أو المتجر الإلكتروني للمجلس موجود دائما، تطلب منه شهادات الحضور أو الكتب وغيرها من المنتجات التي يقدمها المجلس. التواصل من خلال قنوات المجلس المتاحة من عدة يعني منصات إلكترونية كما يعرفها الكثير منكم. من المهم أيضا أن نذكر قبل انطلاقة هذه المحاضرة أن المداخلات الصوتية غير متاحة، نعتذر لكم، ولكن من خلال ركن QI&A اللي هو السؤال والجواب تقدر تكتب سؤالك وننقل هذا السؤال إلى محاضرنا. I will leave the floor now. أترك المجال. I will leave the floor now to our guest, Engineer Francois, to start his speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Al-Fari, and to the Chairman of the Saudi Arabian Quality Council, Dr. Al-Amri. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to meet with such an esteemed audience today. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
And a big privilege for me to be part of such an esteemed audience today. Thank you for a wonderful introduction, Engineer Walid. It's a privilege. I have been to Saudi Arabia many times in my life, and I find it a wonderful society, a wonderful environment, and I'm really excited to have been invited today to discuss with you some aspects of the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index, referred to as the QI4SD index. Some opening remarks about the index. So the index provides a framework of indicators that summarizes the overall state of development of a country or a region's quality infrastructure and the readiness of that to support the sustainable development goals. This is an index that was designed to also provide input to support policy processes and national implementation plans in relation to quality infrastructure and to work. And this also supports a lot the work of coordination of technical cooperation programs and developmental agencies worldwide. The index, I just need to add, I was not involved with the development of this version of the index, but I have been a critic. I've had many concerns and some good aspects that I've highlighted about the index. And for that reason, for the last year, I have been getting quite involved with the team that's been responsible for the development of this index. So just to reflect one aspect of the index, this is not the only index that has been developed in the last years to measure the status of quality infrastructure in a country or in a region. We recognize that there was also work done over the last many years, which was supported by the German government, especially by the Physikalische Technische Bundesanstalt. This is the metrology institution in Germany and one of the top metrology institutions, as you would know, in the world. And there has been another initiative to develop the Global Quality Infrastructure Index program. But this has been done by consulting firms, Mesopartner and Analytica. And they have been working on this also with several universities for several years. And it's very interesting for us to see that there's reasonable good correlation between the results. And there's also, since April this year, some coordination between the institutions that's been working on the development of the QI4SD index and then the GQII program team. So today I will reflect on the details of the index, and then we will go into some specific aspects of the performance of the system within Saudi Arabia itself. I know we have a very esteemed audience today of quality professionals, but I thought it's important that we just have again a slide to remind ourselves of what quality infrastructure means. So if we then look at quality infrastructure, we're looking at the system, which is a combination of public and private organizations, but also those policies and legal and regulatory frameworks and practices that are needed in a nation, in a country, to enhance the quality, safety, and environmental soundness of goods, services, and processes. So we're looking at the system. And this system is very important for the effective operation of the domestic markets. And then for the international recognition of the system is then very important to enable also access to foreign markets. And it's extremely important that we remind ourselves that the quality infrastructure is not just there to support exports of products and to be able to be a global player. The quality infrastructure is extremely important when it comes to the protection of domestic consumers, but also looking at fairness in domestic markets. And I believe in this audience, this issue is well known to everybody in this house today. And what is extremely important is the promotion and the sustainable economic development and the contribution then of that through the quality infrastructure system. and of course towards the environmental and social well-being of the nation as well. And where this becomes very technical is that this relies on several dimensions. The dimensions of metrology, of standardization, of accreditation, of conformity assessment, and of market surveillance. And this definition is informed through the work of InetQI, and I will talk a little bit more about InetQI in the next slide. Also, we have a diagram which has been developed by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, that shows how the system that really starts from the aspects of policy and governments is then disseminated through various policies, through various institutions, and then through the conformity assessment services, or the quality infrastructure services, as we also refer to them, but including aspects such as calibration and verification and quality promotion, and where we disseminate then this infrastructure that is available to the market and to the enterprises that need to use this mostly. And what's extremely important then is that the quality infrastructure institutions need to ensure that the system within Saudi Arabia is internationally recognized. And this is so important when it comes to global trade and the opportunity for Saudi Arabia to work within the global marketplace. And ultimately, of course, all of this benefits the consumers within the marketplace or in general society. If we then reflect on the index itself, one particular aspect of this index was that this index was an attempt to not use questionnaires to get information. The index I referred to that was developed with the support of the PTB, this index is heavily informed through data which is collected through questionnaires. And questionnaires are dependent on the sometimes subjective inputs we see from people. And it all depends when a questionnaire has to be filled in on how a person that is responsible for completing a questionnaire is then tasked with that function. So a key difference between the QI4SD index and and other indices is that this index does not rely on questionnaires. It relies on data that is available from international system, which comprise all the organizations and institutions internationally that govern the definitions and the work of quality infrastructure. And this is informed through an organization referred to as InetQI, the International Network of Quality Infrastructure. And if we look at the logos in the bottom, I have included some of the logos, but the InetQI membership extends to nearly 30 organizations. And these organizations, which include then UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, the International Standardization Organization, ISO, the International Electrotechnical Commission, the ITU for Telecommunications, the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, the International Organization for Legal Metrology, the International Accreditation Forum, the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, and so on, and so on, and so on. Also included in the membership is the World Bank, and also the WTO has particular interest in the work of InetQI. So an important aspect of this index is that this then draws data from these institutions and these international organizations which work with the quality infrastructure institutions in a particular country and in a particular economy. And it's then a snapshot that is taken every 2 years of data that's available and which is then validated and then which is compiled into this index. So in this particular case, we refer to this as a general QI index. General because it covers all the dimensions of quality infrastructure. There are also some other indices that measure just particular dimensions, maybe just metrology, or maybe just an aspect of accreditation. In this case, the QI4SD index measures all the dimensions. Also, it measures this in the global context. So it draws data that is available from across the world as we know it today. The index is then based on a scoring based on a principle which is referred to as the composite indicator approach. And I will reflect on some aspects of this in the next slides, which means the indicators, in a total of 36 indicators are there for the 5 QI dimensions, and these indicators are then computed through an algorithm in order to determine a score for every one of the indices, for every one of the dimensions, my apologies. What is also unique in terms of the QI4SD index, it does not only measure the relative strength of quality infrastructure globally, it also measures how this relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular to the pillars of people, planet, and prosperity. So on the one hand, it gives us the indication of how strong a country's quality infrastructure is relative to other countries or other regions, but it also tells us how this quality infrastructure relates to the objectives as I outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals for people, planet, and prosperity. And this, of course, is extremely relevant, especially at the policy level, but also for a lot of the developmental agencies, which are then investing in programs to upgrade quality infrastructures worldwide. And what is important is this index was only developed recently, as recent as between 2020 and 2022. And this was an effort that was coordinated amongst the InetQI institutions. And UNIDO has taken it on themselves to act as, let's call it the secretariat then for this work. And the objective would be to publish this information every 2 years and to be able to see how countries are then advancing. In this index today, we will reflect on the data that was available in the end of 2021. And this data then was published in 2022. At the moment, the work is well advanced for the publication of the data for the end of 2023 that will be published as the 2024 version of the index. And in this index in 2022, it covered 137 countries, including a significant number of the Gulf states, but lacking especially in some of the developing parts in the world, especially we see in the continents of Africa, quite a shortcoming in terms of a lot of data. This slide just reminds us then of the Sustainable Development Goals and what the aspects are in terms of people, planet, and prosperity that are considered. And the index then will map also then the performance, as I've indicated, of the quality infrastructure, especially in the levels of accreditation, conformity assessment, standards and metrology, in terms of these 3 dimensions. So, apologies that maybe the slide is a little bit full of information, and I do trust that the SQD will make the information also available, or the slides, to all the members present today. But it is important that we get some insights in terms of what is being considered when each of these dimensions are then being ranked. So I will go through this a little bit slowly, and also to recognize that you know, the understanding of some of this may be not too clear to some people in the audience. And of course, if you are a metrologist and work in the field of metrology, one would be clear in terms of which all the acronyms are. And again, I apologize that we do not have a detailed explanation today of all the acronyms that exist. So in the end of, if we look at the area of accreditation, so what basically happens in the area of accreditation, the index looks at the membership and the status of membership of the Saudi accreditation system. very much represented then through the work of SAC in terms of the key international organizations being ILAC and the IAF. On the one hand, one can be a member, but on the other hand, one can also see that one is a signatory of various agreements that exist. And in the case of Saudi Arabia, we know that these agreements are in place and the membership has been achieved. But what is very important, apart from just the membership, is then to see what the scope is of accreditation services that can be offered by the accreditation system in Saudi Arabia to all the users in the country. And it's where the scope of services then are becoming important to determine the ranking. And the scope cannot just be an agreement between, individuals. The scope undergoes what is called peer assessment. So there's also a big amount of work that is happening to ensure that there's a double assurance of the competency within the system in Saudi Arabia in terms of offering accreditation services. So these are the key aspects that's being looked at from the accreditation perspective, the membership and the contribution to the work internationally, but also the extent of how the system of accreditation, how extensive this works within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What is a difficult one to assess is then the area of conformity assessment, because conformity assessment services often happens in a domain which is dominated by private sector players, by conformity assessment bodies, and we do not see such a well-organized system globally where conformity assessment services make available data. And this has been recognized as one of the key weaknesses of the index, that it has been extremely challenging to collect good, credible data for how extensive conformity assessment services are that are offered in a country. Conformity assessment in this case, which means certification services, testing services, and inspection services. And this gives a measure of the quality infrastructure services that are offered in a country. So from this part of the index, one would get an idea of how the industry would be using the quality infrastructure system that is in the country. And again, this looked at international memberships, in this case of IQNet, and some of the aspects of ISO and IEC certificates. And again, this is probably, as we recognize, the weakest part of this index. A very strong part of the index is that in metrology. And we know in this context that SASO, also being responsible as the national measurement institution in Saudi Arabia, is doing extensive work, where the system again, or the index, will measure the international membership in the level of scientific metrology, which is through the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, but also in the area of legal metrology, which is then through the work of the International Organization for Legal Metrology. And in this case of metrology, there is a very well-defined system internationally to benchmark how equivalent the national measurement system in a country is to that of other countries. So we could see in the area of metrology, we probably have some of the best data, which is available from the BIPM through what is referred to as a key comparison database. Where the metrology index is weak is in the area of legal metrology. In the legal metrology area, we only see the system measuring what is referred to as the OML certificate scheme. And this system is a little bit biased, in my personal view, towards countries which manufacture measuring instruments. And this system, as the index is currently designed, does not necessarily measure the strength of the legal metrology system in all its respects. So that would be the weakness of the metrology dimension. In terms of the policy dimension, many aspects of policy are being tested. And I know in this case, the Saudi Quality Council have done tremendous work with the policymakers in Saudi Arabia. And we have seen, and you'll see in the index, that Saudi Arabia has scored extremely well in the dimension of policy. And this is, again, testimony of the work and the vision of the SQC. It looks about all the aspects of policy, whether there's quality policy in place, whether there's funding for the work of the quality policy and the institutions, whether there's a plan, whether there's a system to monitor and evaluate the quality performance, and whether there are efforts to promote and provide training and capacity building in relation to the quality policy. And we have seen in Saudi Arabia, and I think it was mentioned earlier, for the good work done the last 30 years through the work of the Quality Council and the vision that the Saudi has, that this element has ranked extremely well. We also saw that Saudi Arabia has done very well, as I will show in the area of standards. Standards in Saudi Arabia under the coordination then of the work of SASO, which measures how actively Saudi Arabia and the system is in participating in the work of the International Standardization Organization and in the work of the International Electrotechnical Commission and in the work of the International Telecommunications Union. And here, two things are measured: the membership and the contribution, but also how the standards that are developed through these three organizations internationally are then absorbed and adapted and used in the country itself. So again, the dimension of the membership, the participation, but also how this is utilized. And a lot of information, but important we reflect on that. And in total then, 36 general indicators that were then used to then determine the index. I will move to the next slide, which just gives an indication of then the separate mapping which is then done, where the aspects of people, planet, and prosperity are then considered. And in this case, it's only applied to 4 dimensions.
Sorry,
and to
Mr.
give some
Francois.
indication.
Excuse
Yes,
me,
Mr. Yes,
half
Mr.
time passed. We have around
Okay,
25
perfect.
minutes up to date, so 15 minutes to conclude this session. And give the floor for the Q&A.
Thank you, sir.
The Q&A, please, I remind the audience, عندنا Q&A corner. You can address your question. يعني تقدرون تسألون من خلال ركن ال Q&A tool اللي موجودة عندكم تحت في الشاشة. شكرا.
So in the area of people, planet, and prosperity, just to give an indication of how this mapping was done, there was international work done with the organizations concerned, for example, the ISO, and only some standards were selected. And again, we believe this is maybe also a weakness in the system. For example, only 21 standards were selected, where ISO considered these standards extremely important in terms of the aspects of people, planet, and prosperity. And then the manner in terms of which these 21 standards were then utilized and adopted within each country was then assessed. So in this case, perhaps not a good sample, because we know there are more than 20,000 standards out there. And the sample in this case would only be a small sample of 21. But this was a similar approach in each of the dimensions. So although it was a very good attempt to look at mapping quality infrastructure to the Sustainable Development Goals in this way, everyone agrees that there's still significant work that has to be done to really make sure that this becomes a very robust measure. Okay, so in the last few minutes, we will just look at the performance then of Saudi Arabia in terms of the ranking that was done in 2022. And it's very important. I will come back to the point of 2022, because we know that significant work has happened, especially by SAC, in the last couple of years when it comes to improvements in the system. A challenge we have is that quality infrastructure improvement takes a lot of time. It is not so easy to just change any of or improve any of the dimensions very quickly. It's an effort that is the result of many, many years of work. So if we look at the first graph on the top left, it will show that Saudi Arabia was placed 45th in the world. So this means out of the total of 137 countries that were ranked, the ranking for Saudi Arabia came in as number 45. In the region, in the bottom one, if we look at the Middle East, North Africa, this is how the grouping was done. Saudi Arabia was ranked number 4. And then we can also see the aspects of the different dimensions in terms of metrology, standardization, conformity assessment, accreditation, and policy. We can then see how Saudi Arabia's ranking was done. And this ranking shows it in the context of the GDP countries that Saudi Arabia is part of, which is the large group in terms of GDP countries. I have a better slide after this to show a little bit more of the details of this regard. Also, the line which we see going across. So if we look, for example, at this dimension of metrology, we will see that the line shows what is the average score that was obtained. And we can see that Saudi Arabia did significantly better in several areas than just the average scores. And the same then for the 3 Ps. The slide is a little bit busy, so maybe this slide is a bit more informative, I thought. If we look at this slide then as a summary, and I took this from the reports that were published. So this ranks Saudi Arabia in the context of what is referred to by the World Bank as the large group of GDP countries. There is, of course, also an extra large group. And I have a table towards the next slide or so that will list what these L group countries are. And we can see in the L group of 46 countries, Saudi Arabia was ranked number 25. And as I indicated earlier, in the overall ranking, it was ranked number 45 out of 137 countries in the world. And what we can see is in this ranking that Saudi Arabia scored more or less close to where the median is of this L group countries. And then we have this plot, the spider diagram, which shows what the strengths and the weaknesses were within the system at that point in time. Now, a weakness doesn't mean that work was not progressing. And this term we have to use with extreme caution. But we could see from 2022 that Saudi Arabia did better in conformity assessment than the L group countries in terms of the median. So the gray shading will show us here what the median of the L group was, and then the blue shading shows us where Saudi Arabia scored. And we can see in policy that Saudi Arabia scored 100%. And this was in 2022. I'm going to jump to a slide where I have my prediction. It's my prediction. This is not tested. But in my prediction, we will see that in 2024, that Saudi Arabia will have advanced significantly in terms of accreditation. The work done by SAC in many, many years have now culminated with just after 2021, early in 2022, SACs were managed to get several scopes of its accreditation recognized through the international agreements of ILAC and the IAF. And we know it was just a little bit of bad timing where the index was made at a particular point in time and where the recognition process by ILAC and IAF, because of this process of peer evaluation and the ongoing work and the time it takes to validate the requirements that had to be met, where this was just not done in time. And we do suspect then in 2024 that there will be a significant advancement in the specific dimension of accreditation, and most likely some advances also in the dimensions of metrology and even in standards. This, and I'm coming to the last couple of slides now. So then, if we look at the slides again in 2022, and this summarizes the L group of countries in terms of the GDP definition. So as you can see, it includes the Netherlands, Switzerland, and such. And This only shows the top 25. There were a total of 46 countries that are formed part of this L group. And we could see that Saudi Arabia ranked number 25. And this just shows more or less the other dimensions of also the other nations that were ranked. And we can see here again that in the area of policy, Saudi Arabia scored some of the best. And it was really only because of the limitations in the ranking of accreditation at that point in time with the data that was available, that the score for Saudi Arabia was relatively on the median side and in the middle of the L group. Now, what is important in terms of also some of the conclusions which were derived from this first index is that the quality infrastructure is very strongly linked to the larger countries, especially where there's export and where there's strong manufacturing. We can see from the results that countries with manufacturing economies, which are exporting in general, they scored very high in terms of the QI. We also then see that countries with a higher GDP will score in general higher than countries where the GDP is lower. And there's a reciprocal relationship between economic prosperity and quality infrastructure. This also tells us that nations that are developing, that are prospering, recognize how important quality infrastructure is for all the reasons of domestic economic growth, but also then for growing your economy beyond your own borders and to export. And what is important is we recognize that Germany, in terms of the initial index, came out as the country with the strongest quality infrastructure in the world, followed by China, France, the US, and the UK. We do not see them on this slide, which I show, because this slide shows the L group countries and the economies of China, France, the US, and the UK are classified then as the extra XL countries. So they unfortunately are not visible in this particular slide. So we believe that in 2024, it is very, very realistic for Saudi Arabia to be amongst the top 10 in at least the L group countries, and maybe even better. And we are extremely curious to see how the scoring will work out, but Saudi Arabia will have advanced significantly in terms of the new ranking. I will just have some closing remarks. So to reflect then, the Saudi Vision 2030 and the National Industrial Strategy recognizes the importance of quality assurance in achieving their objectives. This includes the if we go through Vision 2030 and the NIS, we see that it refers and talks about the importance to include the implementation of quality management systems, to raise quality standards of the selected industrial sectors, and then to allow faster integration of domestic suppliers into global value chains, and to improve consumer safety and to enable the transition to more sustainable production practices and more effective delivery of public goods and services. We also see that the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources has taken a particular interest in to also understand how it should execute its mandate to develop industrial growth in the country in support of the National Industrial Strategy and ultimately towards Vision 2030. In Saudi Arabia, we know and we see, and I've experienced it, that there's a solid understanding of the importance of quality infrastructure with policymakers, within the leadership in the QI institutions, and with industry leaders within the KSA. And what is important for us is to know that significant advances have been made in the kingdom in the development of these QI dimensions and the strengthening of the services and the capabilities in the institutions since the 2022 survey. And it's then anticipate that this will be evident in the 2024 results, that we'll see a significant improvement then in the scoring that would have been achieved by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Where there is an opportunity would be then in how the broader industry, especially looking into the small and the medium enterprises, would be embracing conformity assessment services. This is the one dimension which is totally dependent on how people absorb and make use of the quality infrastructure services that are then supported then through the quality infrastructure institutions themselves. And it's in this domain which is a unique opportunity to get more and more of the companies to start using conformity assessments services to improve the testing that they have access to improve the access to certification and management systems that they have access to, and to get testing done as well of products and of services. And in doing so, this will not only enhance the quality of the products and the services, but this will also to develop the global value chains to ensure that more and more domestic companies can start benefiting and participating in opportunities that could lead to further exports and economic development. Very important, and then just to conclude, we know that the InetQI network is working hard to improve the index. There are deficiencies in the index, and this has been recognized. And I understand in the next publication, some dimensions would have been improved, but we do know that we need to understand that the index is not perfect. But if we look at the relative information that is forthcoming, the information correlates well with that of the other indices. And this is believed then to be a really useful tool in future to inform a lot of policy decisions, but also to give an indication of the strength of a country's quality infrastructure when it comes even creating an investment destination case or to enhance economic development and growth. With that, Chair and Engineer Walid, thank you. I stop at this point in time. All the reports which I've used to also extract this information is available. The link is on the screen. It's available from UNIDO, and there are several reports with all the details and also the very detailed algorithms to show exactly how everything has been calculated. This can also be obtained from this link through some of these reports that can then be accessed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Francois. And really, without this presentation or this lecture, I think reading the report is not easy. I really appreciate your efforts, and you highlight how can we also read the report, and also you also provide us with the required resources. So for all quality professionals, they can access this link and find out the report and try to explore how can they participate in improving the quality infrastructure index for their country. We have several questions. First one from Mr. Murtada Gabba. He said, what is the main opportunities for KSA, for Saudi Arabia, for more improvement? I.e., where is the potential improvement opportunity for Saudi Arabia to improve the quality in infrastructure index?
Okay, I will try. Of course, I think the first aspect is that there is awareness in the different aspects within the kingdom of how is this index formulated? Because we all want to improve, but we need to understand what does this index measure. So two important aspects in terms of looking at the dimension of accreditation. As I said, I think SAC, and I know I've had many meetings and many discussions with Dr. Adel and the team within the Saudi accreditation system, and they have done a lot of work. So to improve in accreditation, this is the work of SAC. I mean, the SAC needs to ensure that the various accreditation services are available that support, and the scope is extensive to correspond to as much of the scope of accreditation services which ILAC and the IAF have outlined. So this is the business of SAC. When it comes to standardization, SASO is doing very well, especially in the adoption of the standards from the IEC. I think in terms of the standards from IEC, or maybe it was ITU, I cannot remember, actually Saudi Arabia scored #1. So if we go into the particular indicators, we could see in some cases that Saudi Arabia was ranked as the best in the world. So of course, other aspects of these dimensions need to be considered. What is difficult is that the index measures, for example, for standardization, how Saudi Arabia is contributing towards the committees and the work of standards development. And we know that standards development work is not just done by SASO. It should be done by SASO working with experts within the industry. So in standardization, one aspect is to just adopt standard, but the other side is to contribute, to influence how standards are being developed. And this is going to be important. In metrology, we think that the Saudi Arabia is doing very well because they are busy with comparisons. We know there was big investments made in the National Metrology Institute within SASO, and it will take time to get the international equivalence of the measurement system to keep developing. And we know this is an expensive and a very extensive and slow process, and this is underway. The big area would be in conformity assessment, to be sure that the access to the work of conformity assessment bodies, that products need to be tested, systems need to be certified. And this is the big area where there's a huge opportunity, especially we saw in terms of the smaller companies. So we do believe that there needs to be campaigns supported especially by MIMR. This is one idea, to really support companies to be better trained in what conformity assessments are available, and to assist companies to become certified, to assist companies to have more testing done, and to ensure that these are done by accredited facilities. Ultimately, the accreditation of the work of conformity assessment bodies will be important. Thank you. I hope I covered that, not too extensive.
Thank you. Very informative. We have a question from Engineer Abdullah Al-Hargan. He said, when the report will be updated as it is made based on, the presentation based on the data of 2021?
Yes, so the next report is expected in November 2024, based on the data of October 2023. So we know that the data was already collected for October 2023, which was the cutoff, and the process to validate all the data, that has been ongoing for several months now, and we look forward to the next report by November 2024.
Great. Another question from Engineer Abdullah Hargan. How is the engagement is made with the QI entities in different countries to assure accurate results and to boost efforts to do much better work, hence results in such report? Enhanced results, I think, in such report.
This is a very important question, and also again we'll talk about how the index information is used. So the index draws data from the key international organization, data which is available at the level of the ISO, at the BIPM, at ILAC, the IAF, and such. So this is all dependent on how the quality infrastructure institutions within Saudi Arabia, so this would be SAC and SASO mainly, how they participate in the work of these international organizations, because they have to ensure that the data for Saudi Arabia is updated. The information is fed from these institutions into the work of ISO, into the work of ILAC, IAF, into the BIPM, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the data is up to date. The problem we have in the system is in the area of conformity assessment, where there is not a good international organization that is well known, similar to ISO, that collects data on conformity assessment services. And this is also a weakness in the system. So as long as the institutions, the lead institutions, keep pushing the data and make sure it's up to date, and maybe in future this will even be automatic, because at the moment there's still a lot of manual processes, then the data should be fine. But we do know, and I can say this with a lot of knowledge, that SASO and SAC is working very hard to ensure the data is updated and the data is available. And we should see then in 2024 results that this information is then up to date.
Thank you. Another question from Mr. Mustafa Jaballah, or Jaballah. How can organizations link the QI to their ESG sustainability reporting?
Very, very important question. And I think people have learned that as the first attempt was then to link this to the Sustainable Development Goals, to the triple Ps, it should be more important then to start linking also to other indicators such as the ESG. And I do not have a clear answer in terms of the work that is being done to look at that, but I will allow me, please, within the next weeks, to really actually ask the members of the InetQI, especially UNIDO, this particular question. And then I will be happy to come back, Engineer Walid, with a really good answer, because at the moment, I do think that the relevance of the triple P dimensions was good for this index, but we have seen that people would like to see some other answers also coming from the index, and ESG is definitely one of them.
Okay, thank you. We will proceed with other questions. One of the important questions is about the legal metrology, and what is the impact or the influence of the legal metrology on the index? Because it has a vital and direct on the vital really impact on and direct on the quality of life of the community.
I really like that question, because this is the one area I personally have been criticizing the index. Because if we look at legal metrology, as we know today, covers trade, weights and measures. It covers environment, safety, and health. But the index for the indicators for legal metrology only measure.
نعتذر لكم، يبدو أنه عنده صعوبة في الاتصال. يعني هذه واحدة من التحديات، الخبراء الدوليين يسافرون ويتنقلون يعني من مكان لمكان، فأحيانا ينتقل إلى مكان ما يستطيع يعني أو ما يجد يتوفر فيه إنترنت جيد موثوق مثل ما يكون في مكانه الدائم أو موقعه في بيته أو في مكتبه. فنعتذر لكم. هو اليوم مسافر، كان الصباح كان عنده رحلة يعني مسافة 2 ساعة. يمكن هذا السبب اللي خلى النت عنده شوية ما هو جيد. يمكن المكان اللي فيه كان نوعا ما ضعيف النت فيه. وهذه واحدة من يعني تحديات الاتصال. والحمد لله السعودية يعني في المؤشر العالمي في الإنترنت تعتبر يعني تقدم مستوى جيد حقيقة مقارنة بدول العالم الأخرى، والكل يعيش يعني هذه النهضة الرقمية اللي كلنا يعني ننتعش أو نستفيد منها، ولله الحمد والمنة. يمكن بعض الأسئلة ممكن أقدر أجاوبها أنا بسرعة من خلال ما استعرضه الخبير الدولي، اللي يتعلق بسؤال الأخ حماد بالنسبة للرانكينج حق السعودية في الإندكس مقارنة بدول الخليج. هو الإندكس أصلا يقارن مجموعات، يعني حسب اقتصاديات الدول قسم العالم إلى مجموعات. فالسعودية في L2 جروب، فأنت لو طلعت على التقرير تلقى كل مجموعة دول حسب اقتصادها تكون لها مقارناتها الخاصة فيها. ويبدو أنه ما في شيء خاص بدول الخليج، لكن يستطيع الخبير أنه يسحب البيانات هذه حقت كل الدول. Yes, Mr. Francois is available now.
Apologies for that. I don't know what happened there.
No problem. We were talking about the question about the legal metrology and its impact on the index.
Yes, I think just to summarize, this is in my view, one of the weak aspects of the index, especially because it does not measure all aspects of legal metrology. It only measuring instruments that has been type approved through the certification scheme. So the index in this case is biased towards countries which manufacture measuring equipment and not to countries to use it. So this is one area where I have been extremely vocal about the criticism of especially the metrology dimension. And I know that the team from InetQI has taken note. The OIML, as the international organization, have indicated they need to design a system to measure better what countries have been doing to improve their legal metrology system. So this will be with the OIML. But this is it's a big weakness, and this is not fair because we see that Japan, Germany, especially China, people that make measuring instruments, especially Poland, etc., that they are scoring very high, and the US for that matter, but not countries that do not design and manufacture and measuring equipment.
Thank you. Another important question is regarding the role of the quality society like Saudi Quality Council and other quality society in other countries. What is your advice? How do you see their role to have some impact on and improvement on the quality infrastructure index for their country?
I think it's two levels. At the one level, it is to ensure that policymakers understand the importance of quality and the quality culture. And I believe in this case, the Saudi Quality Council has been doing extremely well. So in this case, the other case I would say is to promote and to create a quality culture within the industry. So quality as being important for not just the big companies, because big companies that especially deal with a lot of international companies are already forced to have a good quality culture, able to work together. But we see as these supply chains need to be developed, and as we developed a competitive cluster, let's look at aerospace. You'll see that the top companies that can work with the global aerospace industry, they would have a very strong quality culture, and they would use quality services and conformity assessment. But we do not necessarily see, as you go down the supply chain, that all the small suppliers and all the small companies that can benefit and can contribute to this work can meet the requirements. So it's really to promote the quality culture and to get more and more of the smaller companies to upgrade themselves and to become users of the quality infrastructure services.
Thank you. Maybe the last question is about the national quality strategy. You know, Saudi Arabia announced the national quality strategy a few years ago, and they announced their vision of this strategy. So how do you see the impact or the importance of the quality strategy or the national quality strategy on the quality infrastructure index? Does the index consider that this country has quality strategy and this country doesn't have?
Absolutely. And we saw that this is part of the policy dimension where Saudi Arabia scored 100%. So quality was scored extremely well because of this. If I can perhaps reflect a little bit more about Saudi Arabia, though, I think what we need is that for the quality strategy in Saudi Arabia to also look at these diverse sectors, the other sectors. I know there's a lot of work looking at maybe not traditional manufacturing, looking at tourism, looking at blockchain, looking at all these other areas. Also to look at that the strategy considers the needs of industry. And of course, there will have to be supplier development programs or company development programs to provide technical assistance to many, many companies that cannot yet access quality infrastructure. You know, for companies to put in place an ISO 9001 system or ISO 22000 and then to become certified, this takes a lot of time, a lot of training. And we trust that the national quality strategy will have to have some programs to assist also the new entries, especially the smaller companies, and maybe create a center of excellence for Saudi Arabia, also in terms of quality, where people can get educated, get access to assistance, and then to ultimately also improve their services in that way.
I think the time, we spend more than the time we agreed, and it's working hours also during this day. So I prefer to conclude with many thanks for the audience who really encourage us to continue and provide and continue our journey in uplifting the quality awareness in our country. Thank you very much, Mr. Francois, for your very excellent speech, where we have really obtain very important information about the quality infrastructure index. Especially, you mentioned how do we read this index. I think this is just as an appreciation for your support for the Saudi Quality Council and your participation in this event. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the Saudi quality teams in the front office, especially the designer, Dania, the interpreter, Mr. Nibal, and the other executive team. See you, inshallah, in the next session, next event of the Saudi Quality Council, and wish you a good day. Thank you very much.